WCW Saturday Night is a weekly Saturday night TV show on TBS that was produced by World Championship Wrestling. WCW launched in 1971 initially by Georgia Championship Wrestling. The program existed through various incarnations under different names before becoming WCW Saturday Night in 1992. Although initially the anchor show of the Turner Broadcasting-backed wrestling company, the September 1995 premiere of WCW Monday Night Raw airing on sister station TNT usurped the show's once preeminent position in the company as the primary source of storyline development and pay-per-view build-up. The show's place in the company was further devalued by the advent of WCW Thunder in 1998, airing on TBS and providing the secondary wrestling and storyline development that WCW Saturday Night had produced in the wake of Nitro's burgeoning 3-hour-long format. Once the cornerstone of the WCW wrestling empire, WCW Saturday Night ended its run in 2000 as the company struggled creatively to meet the demands of producing over 6 hours of new broadcast material on a weekly basis. The rights to WCW Saturday Night now belong to WWE as a result of that company's 2001 purchase of selected assets of WCW, including its video library. 59 episodes from 92 to 93 under the WCW Saturday Night banner are available on the streaming service WWE Network and Peacock. Some previous episodes from 85 to 89 under the World Championship Wrestling banner were uploaded in 2015 and 2016 and are also available on the WWE Network. On December 25, 1971, Georgia Championship Wrestling aired its first show on WTCG, a UHF independent station in Atlanta, as a Christmas special. Beginning in late January 1972, the promotion switched its Atlanta television outlet from its longtime home, WQXI-TV now WXIA-TV, to WTCG. In 1976, WTCG, renamed WTBS in '79, began retransmitting its signal via satellite and became a superstation available to cable systems across the United States. As a result, Georgia Championship Wrestling became the first promotion affiliated with the National Wrestling Alliance known as the NWA to have its television program broadcast nationally. Many of the NWA's regional promoters were unhappy, but promoter Jim Barnett claimed since he was only using Georgia-based wrestlers, that there was no harm. Whether or not Barnett was in fact taking the promotion national is a matter of dispute. Some wrestlers, such as Roddy Piper, say that he was in fact doing so, but prevented by fears of crossing organized crime figures involved with the business. Throughout the 70s, Georgia Championship Wrestling was one of the most popular programs on WTBS. The Georgia Championship Wrestling TV series, hosted by Gordon Soley, was taped at the WTBS studios at 1050 Techwood Drive in Atlanta before a small, live-in studio audience, as were most pro wrestling TV shows of that era. The show featured wrestling matches, plus melodramatic monologues and inter-character confrontations similar to the programming offered by other territories, such as the World Wrestling Federation known as the WWF, now WWE, the American Wrestling Association known as the AWA, Jim Crockett Promotions, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, and Mid-South Wrestling. In 1982, Georgia Championship Wrestling changed its main programming name to World Championship Wrestling, a name Barnett had previously used when promoting in Australia. WTBS owner Ted Turner had requested the name change in hopes of giving the wrestling programming on the superstation a less regional scope. Also, by this point, GCW had been running shows in neutral territories like Ohio and Michigan. World Championship Wrestling continued to be taped at the TBS studios until March 1989, when the taping location was moved to the Center Stage Theater in Atlanta. In 1984, WWF owner Vince McMahon, hoping to expand the national reach of his Stamford, Connecticut-based company, bought a majority stake in the Georgia territory and its WTBS time slot for $750,000. On July 14th of that year, viewers tuned into World Championship Wrestling expecting to see Gordon Soley and the stars of GCW, only to witness McMahon introducing WWF programming instead, an event now known in professional wrestling lore as Black Saturday. Freddie Miller, an announcer, was the only member of the original Georgia Championship Wrestling on-air cast who did not either quit in protest or get replaced by McMahon. McMahon had underestimated two major factors, however. The first was the difference in tastes between wrestling fans from different regions of the United States. GCW matches featured an emphasis on in-ring action with longer and more athletic matches. The WWF, however, was more soap opera-like in character, with cartoonish characters and storylines, and also tended to feature short squash matches in which one wrestler dominated the other. GCW's core audience thus did not receive the WWF product now shown on WTBS well. Secondly, McMahon had promised Ted Turner that he would produce original programming for the time slot at the WTBS studios in Atlanta. Instead, WWF World Championship Wrestling was mainly used as a recap show, featuring matches which had previously aired on the WWF's main television programs such as WWF Championship Wrestling and WWF All-Star Wrestling, which were originally produced in the Northeast. Eventually, the WWF did have in-studio squash matches on the show on an infrequent basis. During this time, the show was co-hosted by Freddie Miller and Gorilla Monsoon, with Monsoon serving as the play-by-play announcer and Miller serving as the ring announcer. This did not stem the tide of negative viewer reaction to the WWF show, however. Angry viewers deluged WTBS with over 1,000 complaints, demanding to know where GCW had gone. Turner, angry both at the declining ratings and at McMahon's reneging on his promise of original programming for the WTBS time slot, made two moves to correct the problem. Firstly, he offered Ole Anderson, who had refused to sell his minority interest in GCW to McMahon and instead formed a successor promotion known as Championship Wrestling from Georgia, a 7 a.m. time slot on Saturday mornings. He then gave Bill Watts, the owner of Mid-South Wrestling, a 1-hour time slot on Sundays. These moves upset McMahon, who had assumed that the WWF would be the sole provider of professional wrestling content on WTBS with his purchase of GCW. Turner disagreed, citing McMahon's aforementioned breaking of his promise to provide original WWF programming for the WTBS time slot. The decline in ratings for the WWF's Saturday evening show, and the fans clamoring for GCW, began to make the WWF's foray onto WTBS one that lost the federation money. Eventually, McMahon cut his losses and sold the former GCW time slot to Jim Crockett Promotions for $1 million in March 1985. The final WWF-produced edition of World Championship Wrestling aired on March 30, 1985. JCP's first edition of World Championship Wrestling aired on April 6, 1985. JCP, based in Charlotte, North Carolina and run by Jim Crockett, Jr., was, like CWG and Mid-South, a member of the National Wrestling Alliance and ran NWA-branded shows in Virginia and the Carolinas. Crockett's first order of business was to merge his promotion with CWG, thus allowing his wrestlers to compete on CWG's Saturday morning WTBS time slot and vice versa. This deal, which former Georgia Championship Wrestling promoter Jim Burnett helped broker, however, forced the elimination of the Mid-South Wrestling program, which had been the highest-rated program on WTBS, from the WTBS schedule. Bill Watts had been poised to take over the former GCW time slot from McMahon, but instead ended up selling his promotion by now known as the Universal Wrestling Federation to Crockett in 1987. JCP retained the World Championship Wrestling name. Crockett filled the time slot with 2 hours of original programming filmed in Turner's Atlanta studios. The program name would also become the promotion's name following the purchase of JCP by Turner Broadcasting in 1988. In addition, the Saturday morning Championship Wrestling from Georgia program would become Championship Wrestling and use the same set as the Crockett Air World Championship Wrestling Saturday evening program. World Championship Wrestling would be renamed WCW Saturday Night on April 4, 1992. This reflected an overhauled look and a new home studio arena at the Center Stage Theater in Atlanta with some footage from matches in Columbus, Georgia. The show was presented in the neon style with a blue and pink color scheme. Neon signs displayed the show's logo, and the wrestlers entered through a silver Miller curtain. The show was given a new look again in March 1994, with a futuristic design with a unique entryway of slide-open doors and billowing smoke as the performers made their way to the ring. When the show originally premiered, it was hosted by Jim Ross and Jesse Ventura. Bruno Sammartino also appeared sporadically as a guest color commentator during certain weeks in '92. Tony Schiavone took over the hosting duties following Ross' departure for the WWF in '93 and remained until '98. Bobby Heenan would replace Ventura after joining WCW in the beginning of '94. Dusty Rhodes, who affectionately referred to Saturday Night as the Mothership, replaced him in '95 and continued until January '98. Rhodes and Schiavone were removed from the broadcast so Schiavone could focus on his other broadcasting duties and Rhodes could take a managerial role after having turned heel, joining the New World Order. They were replaced by Scott Hudson and Mike Tenay, who was later replaced with Larry Zbyszko. Gene Okerlund often handled interviews after he joined WCW in '93, as did Tenay, Schiavone, and Lee Marshall. In the summer of 1996, WCW Saturday Night was taped at WCW Pro's Disney MGM Studios set in Orlando, Florida due to all of Turner's mobile production units being used by other broadcasters for the '96 Summer Olympics in Atlanta. When WCW introduced the live program Monday Night Raw on TNT in September 1995, the pre-taped Saturday Night became secondary in importance. When Thunder premiered in January 1998, Saturday Night became WCW's third-tier program. The majority of airtime would be used to display up-and-comers and recent graduates of the WCW power plant with the occasional squash match as well as recapping the major events of the other shows. The main event would often feature mid-card performers such as the current Cruiserweight Champion, Television Champion, or US Heavyweight Champion in a non-title match. Hudson, Tenay, and Marshall man commentating and locker room interviewing duties throughout this period. Backstage, Mean Gene Okerlund would regularly promote his WCW hotline which provided fans with insider information on recent events in the company. On April 1, 2000, WCW Saturday Night aired its final episode under its traditional format. 1 week later, it became a recap show and no longer featured exclusive matches. On July 1, 2000, the show was retitled WCW Saturday Morning and moved from its established evening time slot to a late morning time slot. The show was cancelled 1 month later as a result of low viewership. The last episode aired on August 19, 2000, 7 months before WCW was bought out by the WWF and closed its doors entirely.